It was just another typical Thursday morning at the office, the kind that usually passed unnoticed, marked only by the hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint aroma of instant coffee lingering from the break room. I had my usual desk near the window, the sunlight spilling across the keyboard and warm enough to make the morning feel a little softer. The office was quiet, the type of quiet that made small sounds, like the rustle of papers or the click of a stapler, seem louder than they really were. The three women I often saw around the office were already immersed in their routines, each moving with a quiet confidence that made the space feel alive without the need for loud voices. There was Sonia, tall and elegant, with that effortless composure that made her presence hard to ignore. She had a way of tilting her head when she listened, as if every word I said mattered. Then there was Hina, warm and approachable, always quick to laugh, her eyes sparkling with a playful curiosity. And finally, Rabia, softer in demeanor but equally magnetic, whose quiet observance often made her seem like she was seeing more than she let on. All three were in the 40 to 45 age range, confident women with their own lives and histories, yet somehow in small ways they made my ordinary office life feel different. I noticed it first during the morning coffee run. Sonia's hand brushed mine lightly when passing the sugar container, a fleeting contact that made my pulse quicken more than it should have. Hina caught my eye across the room and gave a smile that lingered longer than necessary, a hint of warmth that felt deliberate. Rabia, across her desk, leaned slightly closer when I explained a minor issue with a spreadsheet, her shoulder just grazing mine in a way that left a faint warmth behind. None of it was overtly romantic. On the surface, it was just small, everyday gestures, but there was a softness to the way they moved, a subtle attention that made me aware of their presence in a new way. I tried to focus on my work, reminding myself that this was just another Thursday. Yet even as I typed away, I couldn't ignore the small sensations. The warmth of a hand briefly resting on my arm, the brush of hair near my ear when Hina bent over to pick up a fallen pen, the quiet way Sonia's eyes seemed to follow me when I moved across the office. These little touches, unnoticed by others, built a slow tension in the air, a quiet intrigue that I couldn't name but could feel deep in my chest. By the time the clock nudged closer to mid-morning, I realized this day might be different. There was something unspoken in the way the three of them glanced at me, an unspoken awareness, a shared amusement that made me wonder if they were noticing the same things I was. And for the first time, I felt a gentle pull, a quiet curiosity to see where this subtle, slow-burning tension might lead. What had always been ordinary now felt a little extraordinary, as if the office itself had shifted, just slightly, to make room for something more intimate, more humaned up by mid-morning. The hum of the office felt a little warmer, more intimate, as if the space itself had shifted subtly around me. I glanced at the clock and realized I had planned to leave early that day, an unusual choice but necessary. I gathered my things quietly, trying not to disrupt the rhythm of the office, when Sonia appeared beside my desk. "I was just about to make another cup of coffee," she said, her voice calm but carrying a gentle insistence. "Do you want to join me?" She held the mug in her hand, and I noticed the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the aroma of coffee, a subtle, comforting warmth. There was nothing overt in her invitation, yet the softness in her eyes suggested she didn't want me to leave just yet. I hesitated, feeling my chest tighten slightly, aware of the flutter in my stomach. As I followed her to the break room, Hina appeared, leaning casually against the counter, her notebook tucked under one arm. "Oh, I didn't know you were leaving early," she said with a playful tilt of her head. "Maybe you could help me go over a few things in this report before you go." Her smile was effortless, her eyes bright with an easy warmth that made me feel seen in a way that transcended ordinary office interaction. When she handed me a pen, her fingers brushed mine lightly, and for a moment, the room felt suspended, the air charged with a quiet electricity. Even Rabia, usually quieter and more reserved, found a reason to draw me in. She appeared with a folder in hand, her soft brown eyes meeting mine. "I could use your advice on this," she said gently, handing me the folder. Our fingers met briefly, brushing as she passed it over, and I felt the faint warmth of her touch linger longer than expected. Her presence was calm but undeniably present, a quiet anchor in the growing tension around me. Each invitation was casual, ordinary on the surface, yet together they formed an unspoken message. They didn't want me to leave. I could feel it in the way they lingered, in the soft glances exchanged among themselves, in the careful timing of their gestures. There was no pressure, no overt demand, just a subtle insistence that made my heart beat a little faster, my thoughts a little louder. We ended up sitting together at the break room table, sharing coffee and conversation. The laughter was light but genuine, filling the corners of the room with warmth. Their attention felt deliberate yet effortless, as if they had all chosen, independently, to create this small bubble of time just for us. The brush of Sonia's hand against mine when reaching for sugar, the playful nudge from Hina when she caught my expression, Rabia's gentle smile when I offered a quiet comment. All of it layered together into a slow, almost imperceptible intimacy. By the time I glanced at the clock again, I realized that the ordinary plan to leave early had completely slipped away. Their presence, so natural yet so intentionally lingering, had pulled me into a small, unspoken orbit where time slowed and emotions began to stir. I didn't know what this subtle tension meant yet, but I knew that something had shifted. The ordinary day now held the quiet promise of connection, curiosity, and the possibility of something more. By the early afternoon, the office had taken on a different rhythm. The usual clatter of keyboards and soft ringing of phones persisted, but now there was a new, quieter current weaving through the space, one I felt keenly. The three women, Sonia, Hina, and Rabia, seemed to have synchronized, each finding small ways to prolong my presence, turning what should have been an ordinary workday into something charged with understated tension. It began with Sonia, who leaned over my desk under the pretense of explaining a project detail. Her hair fell over her shoulder, and as she tucked it back behind her ear, her fingers brushed mine briefly. The touch was fleeting but electric, leaving a warmth that lingered long after she returned to her own desk. She didn't say much beyond the professional explanation, yet her eyes held a quiet amusement, a subtle acknowledgement that we both understood more than the words conveyed. Hina's approach was different, playful and teasing. She appeared moments later with a stack of reports, dropping one deliberately near my elbow. "I was hoping you could help me make sense of this," she said, her voice light and melodic. As she leaned closer to point at a section, her shoulder nudged mine, a subtle reminder of her proximity. There was a sparkle in her eyes, a silent dare, as if she were enjoying the way I was drawn into this small circle of attention, testing how far I might linger. Rabia, quiet and observant, used patience as her approach. She left little notes on my desk with questions about a project, each accompanied by a gentle smile when I approached her for clarification. Once, when handing me a folder, our fingers touched lightly, and she didn't pull away immediately. Just let the brief connection hang there, allowing a shared moment of warmth and awareness. Her calm presence balanced the playful and confident energies of the other two, creating a subtle, almost magnetic tension in the office air. I realized, with a mix of amusement and unease, that there was an unspoken competition at play. Each of them, in their own way, seemed determined to make me stay longer than I had intended. And yet, despite the subtle rivalry, there was no hostility, only a layered, intricate dance of gestures, glances, and words. My chest tightened with a mix of anticipation and self-consciousness. Every brush of hair, every accidental touch, every shared smile pulled me deeper into this orbit of understated desire. Even as I tried to focus on my work, I couldn't ignore how the energy in the room had shifted. My attention kept flicking between them, noticing how Sonia's subtle elegance contrasted with Hina's playful spark and Rabia's quiet steadiness. Each interaction left a different impression, a different flutter in my chest. The ordinary office had transformed into a place of delicate tension, where unspoken feelings simmered beneath polite professionalism. By the time the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, I was acutely aware of how these small, seemingly insignificant gestures, the touch of a hand, a lingering gaze, a shared laugh, were shaping the narrative of my day. I wanted to leave, yet I didn't. And deep down, I wondered if, in some unspoken way, they didn't want me to leave either. By mid-afternoon, the office had quieted down, and the energy shifted from playful teasing to something more tender and personal. The subtle tension of earlier gestures, the brushes of hands, lingering glances, gentle touches, had evolved into a slower, more meaningful rhythm. It was in these small pauses, these unspoken moments, that I began to sense a deeper layer of connection with Sonia, Hina, and Rabia. It started with Sonia. While reviewing a report, she confided softly about the pressure she had been feeling lately, an upcoming project, the weight of responsibility, and the occasional loneliness that accompanied her position. She spoke in a voice just above a whisper, her eyes occasionally flicking to mine for reassurance. I listened carefully, offering empathy, and when I reached out instinctively to touch her forearm in a gesture of support, she didn't pull away. The warmth of her skin beneath my fingers was grounding, a quiet bridge between our worlds. For the first time, I felt a hint of her vulnerability, the hidden side she didn't always show the office. Hina's vulnerability came through differently. During a casual conversation about weekend plans, she mentioned feeling unsure about balancing her personal passions with work. Her eyes, usually so playful, softened as she admitted the small frustrations she rarely shared with anyone. When I leaned slightly closer to offer a comforting smile, she didn't step back. Instead, she let her hand brush against mine lightly when taking a pen to jot down notes, and that simple connection conveyed trust and intimacy more profoundly than words ever could. Rabia, the quiet observer, revealed her vulnerability in subtler ways. She spoke about a project she had been struggling with, her voice soft, almost hesitant, as though unsure whether to let anyone see her uncertainty. When I gently placed my hand over hers while offering guidance, there was a brief, deliberate pause, a moment where we both acknowledged the quiet tension and connection between us. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't romantic in the overt sense, but it carried weight. In that small gesture, I sensed an unspoken acknowledgement, that we could see each other truly, without pretense. The afternoon unfolded as a series of these delicate exchanges, each one leaving me more aware of how much presence, patience, and understanding mattered. I noticed how the office felt warmer, softer, almost protective around us. The faint hum of the air conditioning, the soft clicking of keyboards, the rustle of papers, all these background sounds faded into a gentle soundtrack for our quiet moments. Every laugh shared, every brush of a hand, every attentive look added layers to the invisible bond forming between us. By the end of the afternoon, I realized that the ordinary office had transformed into a space of quiet intimacy. The subtle competition from earlier had evolved into shared vulnerability, and I felt a deeper connection with each of them, not just attraction, but trust, understanding, and a sense of emotional closeness. For the first time, I understood that these women weren't just keeping me around for playful reasons. In their own ways, they were letting me see them, letting me in, and that realization left my chest warm, my heart quietly fluttering, and my mind curiously captivated by what might come next. The late afternoon sun slanted through the office windows, casting long, warm streaks of light across the desks. The usual rhythm of the office had slowed, the usual clatter and hum softened into something more intimate. I realized I had been at my desk far longer than I had planned, drawn in by the subtle gravity of the three women around me. Sania, Hina, and Rabia weren't just keeping me occupied, they were making the ordinary moments feel extraordinary. Sania leaned over my desk to discuss a minor adjustment in a report. Her hair fell like a curtain, and when she tucked it behind her ear, her fingers grazed my hand ever so slightly. The brief contact sent a quiet thrill through me, the warmth of her skin lingering longer than it should. She glanced at me with a faint smile, eyes soft yet filled with subtle amusement, and I caught the hint of a heartbeat in that shared glance. It was an unspoken invitation, a gentle acknowledgement that neither of us wanted this moment to end. Hina's approach was playful but tender. She brought a small snack to share, leaning close enough that her shoulder brushed mine. The scent of her perfume mingled with the faint aroma of the pastries, a sensory detail that made the moment feel oddly intimate. As we shared the snack, her hand accidentally brushed mine, and she laughed softly, a sound that made my chest tighten in a mix of amusement and something I couldn't quite name. Her warmth was both comforting and stirring, a reminder that connection could exist without words, without declarations, simply through presence and small, deliberate gestures. Rabia, ever the quiet anchor, moved with understated grace. She handed me a folder, her fingers brushing mine briefly in passing. The touch was light but deliberate, leaving behind a warmth that was both calming and electrifying. Her eyes met mine, steady and soft, conveying trust and acknowledgement. In that moment, the office faded away. The only reality was the subtle rhythm of closeness between us, the quiet interplay of glances, smiles, and touches that spoke louder than any words could. The conversation drifted naturally from work to small personal anecdotes, and each of us leaned slightly closer in turn, creating a circle of quiet intimacy. The soft hum of the air conditioning, the muted click of keyboards, even the distant murmur of colleagues in the background, all faded into a gentle soundtrack for this lingering afternoon. Every brush of hair, every shared laugh, every accidental touch became a thread, weaving us closer in an invisible tapestry of connection and subtle desire. By the time I glanced at the clock again, hours had slipped by unnoticed. I had planned to leave early, but now I couldn't imagine walking away. Each moment felt suspended, heavy with the kind of tension that was both exhilarating and grounding. Their presence made the ordinary extraordinary. Their touches, their laughter, and their attention made me feel seen in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't just attraction. It was a deep, warm awareness, an emotional gravity pulling me into their world, and into a shared intimacy that was gentle, safe, and profoundly stirring. As the sun dipped lower, I realized that leaving now would feel abrupt, almost unnatural. I wanted to stay, to linger in this quiet warmth, to savor the soft, deliberate closeness of Sania, Hina, and Rabia. And quietly, I wondered if they felt the same. The office had grown quieter, the usual afternoon bustle tapering off into a stillness that felt almost intentional, as if time itself had slowed to accommodate the subtle shift in our connection. Sania, Hina, and Rabia were still around, each finding small ways to remain near me. By now, it was no longer just coincidence or casual gesture. Their presence, the way they lingered, spoke volumes without a single word being uttered. Sania approached my desk first, carrying a stack of papers, yet her movement was slow, deliberate. She rested the documents lightly in front of me, her fingers brushing mine in the process. The touch was fleeting, yet it left a warmth that lingered, an unspoken question hovering in the air. Her eyes met mine, soft and steady, and I felt the subtle pull of her quiet insistence. That she wanted me to stay, that she valued the moments we were sharing more than the passage of time. Hina followed shortly after, leaning casually against the edge of my desk. She caught my gaze and held it for a heartbeat longer than necessary, her lips curved in a playful yet tender smile. "Don't go just yet," she murmured, her voice soft, almost a whisper meant only for me. Her shoulder brushed mine as she adjusted her position, and the touch sent a shiver down my spine, delicate but undeniable. In her presence, there was a magnetic mix of ease and tension, a playful challenge wrapped in gentle warmth. Rabia's approach was more subtle, but no less powerful. She handed me a folder, our fingers brushing briefly but deliberately. She didn't pull away immediately, letting the contact linger just long enough to create an unspoken connection. Her soft brown eyes met mine with a quiet intensity, and I could see in them an invitation, an acknowledgement that we were in this suspended space together, where words were unnecessary, and the smallest gestures carried profound meaning. I realized then that each of them was expressing, in their own way, the same sentiment. They didn't want me to leave. Not through words, but through touch, proximity, and the deliberate timing of their gestures. A laugh that lingered a little too long, a hand resting briefly on my arm, a shoulder nudging mine while moving papers. Each moment was carefully crafted, and each one struck me with the quiet force of longing and attention. I felt my own hesitation, the tug-of-war between politeness and desire, between leaving and staying. My chest felt tight, my pulse quickened with every glance and brush of skin. This was the emotional peak of the day. The slow-burn tension that had been building since morning had now crystallized into something almost tangible, electric yet tender. Every moment with them carried weight, every interaction left a lingering warmth, and every unspoken glance deepened the quiet intimacy we had been cultivating. By the end of this lingering exchange, I understood something fundamental. This wasn't just a casual pull of attention or playful teasing. It was a subtle, quiet confession, a mutual recognition of desire and connection that needed no words, only presence. And as I sat there, caught between the temptation to stay and the instinct to leave, I realized I didn't want to leave. Not yet. Not while the warmth of their attention, the softness of their touches, and the unspoken intensity of their gazes still held me in this delicate, suspended world. As the late afternoon light shifted to the soft glow of early evening, the office felt transformed. The hum of computers and distant phone rings had faded into background noise, replaced by a quiet intimacy that seemed to envelop the three women and me. The day that began as ordinary had evolved into a slow, deliberate dance of glances, touches, and shared moments that left my chest warm and my mind surprisingly calm. Sania leaned over my desk one last time, her hand brushing against mine while passing a folder. The touch was brief, but it lingered in my memory, a gentle warmth that seemed to tether me to the moment. She smiled softly, eyes meeting mine with a quiet, unspoken question, an invitation to stay, to remain present just a little longer. I found myself returning the smile, a silent acknowledgement that I understood, that I was willing to remain in the orbit they had created. Hina, sitting nearby, handed me a coffee she had picked up from the break room, her fingers brushing mine as she placed it on my desk. The gesture was simple, everyday even, but it carried a weight of thoughtfulness that made the ordinary act feel profoundly intimate. As she leaned closer to speak quietly about an upcoming project, her shoulder brushed mine, sending a gentle shiver through me. Her laughter, soft and melodic, filled the space between us, blending with the warmth of the fading sunlight. Rabia, quieter but equally present, lingered by my desk, her hand resting briefly on my arm as she asked a final question about a document. The contact was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but to me it was a reassurance, a shared understanding that this day, and these moments, mattered to her as much as they did to me. Her calm, steady gaze met mine, and in that moment, the quiet tension that had built all day felt resolved in a single lingering acknowledgement. By now, it was clear we were all reluctant to leave the space we had created together. The ordinary office had become a sanctuary of subtle intimacy, where words were unnecessary and the smallest gestures spoke volumes. Each touch, each glance, each shared laugh had woven a delicate web of connection, gentle, respectful, and profoundly human. The warmth of their presence was a quiet, tangible comfort, the kind that leaves a lasting impression without dramatic declarations or overt actions. When it was finally time to leave, none of us moved quickly. We walked toward the elevator together, lingering naturally in each other's presence. Hands brushed occasionally, shoulders leaned near in casual closeness, and soft smiles were exchanged as though acknowledging a shared secret. Outside, the evening air was cool, a gentle contrast to the warmth we carried from the office. As we said our goodbyes, there was no need for dramatic words, just quiet gratitude and the soft acknowledgement of the bond we had formed. I walked away feeling an unexpected fullness, a deep sense of connection, and a lingering anticipation for the next day. The attraction and affection were real but restrained, carried in subtle touches, shared laughter, and mutual understanding. The day ended not with tension or uncertainty, but with quiet, heartfelt warmth, a slow-burning romance that had unfolded gently, leaving all of us richer for the experience.